So welcome back to Managerial Accounting, and our topic for this little mini lecture today is on job order costing, which is a way of keeping track of the material and the labor and the overhead used in the manufacturing process. So we've got 4 objectives, and in this little video, I'll cover off objective 1 and most, but not all, of objective 2. So I'll just focus on those first 2. So we want to describe the cost system used by manufacturing businesses. How is it they keep track of their materials, their labor, and their overhead costs and assign them to products? And then we're going to illustrate a job order costing for a manufacturing business. We're going to take that right up to the point where we account for material and labor and a little bit about overhead. We'll hold off on the allocating of overhead until we get together on Thursday. And then we'll also talk about objective 3 and objective 4 on Thursday. So here we're going to bite off objective 1 and most, but not all, of objective 2. So a cost, just as first objective here, a cost system overview. So we measure, we record, and we report product costs. And job order costing provides the product cost for each quantity of product that is manufactured. Each quantity of product that is manufactured is called a job. So generally that would be a certain number of dresses, a certain number of automobiles, or in our case, a certain number of guitars, or guitars as they say. Right. So job order costing is used by companies that manufacture custom products for customers or batches of similar products. So an apparel manufacturer or a guitar manufacturer, as we have in our model company, Gibson Company, or Legend Guitars, I believe we're calling it. So we're going to be continuing with the discussion of the guitars that we introduced in chapter 1. So we also have what is called process. So here we're going to focus on job order costing, but there's also process costing. So process costing provides product cost for each manufacturing department or process when the process that they use where one unit is not distinguishable from another. Good example of this might be, in producing refining oil or making soap. You don't know one bar of soap from the other. So these are all classic examples of process costing. And we'll do a separate chapter on product process costing. So in process costing, the key thing is the units are not really distinguishable from each other. In the case of guitars, we've got different models of guitars. They use a different quality of wood. In the case of bars of soap, you really can't tell one bar of soap from the other bar of soap. So you've got job order costing, then we have process costing, and then we've got some hybrid method, which we call operations costing, which we'll get into in later points of the semester, where you combine elements of both job order costing and process costing. So here are as a summary of the Legend guitars, and you'll recognize some of the visuals, and hopefully you'll recognize some of the graphics as well. So we know at the top row going across there, we know we have 3 different types of inventory. We've got materials inventory, we've got work in process, and we've got finished goods. So the direct material would be the wood. And then when we cut the wood up, it becomes work in process. And when we assemble the wood, it becomes work in process. And when the products are fully assembled, then the costs are transferred out of work in process to finished goods. And the cost that we keep track of, the material cost and the labor cost together, we call prime costs. And then the labor costs plus the overhead costs we call conversion costs. So what we're going to do here in job order costing is we're going to actually trace the costs through the process, through materials, through work in process, through finished goods. And as we trace the cost to the inventory, it's going to be both materials, and it's going to be labor, and it's going to be factory owned. Right, so objective number 2, how do we actually perform job order costing? Well, we know while good jobs are still in production, they're work in process. When they're completed, they become finished goods. And when they are actually sold, then they become cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold was the only cost that you had to worry about when you were dealing with merchandising companies. But when we deal here with manufacturers, you've got labor costs, you've got materials costs, and you've got overhead costs. So we get the materials, we add to them directly direct labor and factory overhead in the production process. They're in work in process, and then we go ahead and we transfer those to finished goods in the warehouse, and then we ship them out to the various music stores, and they become cost of goods sold. So we're going to have little inventory ledger accounts. So think of these as subsidiary ledgers that we keep. So for materials, we've got hickory, we've got oak, we've got maple. So those are the 3 different types of wood that we have. And then what happens is materials are requisitioned to go into production. And the 2 jobs we've got undergoing here are job number 72 and job 71. So we're going to be transferring materials cost and labor cost and overhead cost into those 2 jobs. That'll become work in process. And when the jobs are actually finished, we transfer the costs out of work in process and they go to the finished goods. And we got 2 jobs here that have been transferred into finished goods, and they are job number 70 and job number 69. Think of these as batches of guitars that have been ordered by a retailer. So let's take a look first at the materials information. So notice here, here's our materials ledger. So think of this as an account in the general ledger. Remember back in financial accounting, you had the T accounts, and then where all the T accounts lived, they lived in the general ledger. And notice here, we've got a receiving report, 196, where we got $10,500 worth of materials put into the materials inventory account. So there's your the receiving report number 196. Notice we highlighted in yellow here, 10,500 worth of materials there that are going into the account. And then we got going out of the account, we've got 2 requisitions. We've got materials requisition 672 and materials requisitions 704. And the first materials requisition, we transferred $2,000 out of raw materials into that job, work in process for that particular job, 672. And for job 704, we transferred out $11,000 worth of costs as well. So notice here what happens. Oops, let me get this little thing out of the way here. You can't see this bar, but I can see this bar. It's blocking my screen here. So notice what happens is, I'm going to get that back. What happens here is that job number 71, that had a balance of $3,000. And then we transferred into that job $3,000 worth of direct material. And for job number 72, we transferred in $11,000 worth of direct materials. So there are journal entries that we make. So here, let's take the $10,500, this one here, so which was the purchase of the materials. So we know in back when we took financial accounting, when we increase an asset, we debit it. And materials, raw materials is an asset account, so we're going to be debiting raw materials. And they were purchased on account, and on account, you're increasing a liability, which is accounts payable. So we have a receiving report that shows when the goods were actually ordered. And then what we do is we end up debiting materials, and we end up crediting accounts payable. So that's the purchase of materials. Now those materials then are requisitions. So we had $13,000 worth of materials that were requisitioned. Where did that come from? So it was this 2,000 here and this 11,000 there. So when the materials are requisitioned, then they are transferred into work in process. So we get a debit to an asset account, work in process, and we're reducing the raw materials inventory by 13,000. The inventory of wood, different types there, by 13,000. So we debit work in process, we credit materials. And you can see, so we've accounted for materials. We also have labor costs that we have to account for. So you have the time tickets where the employees indicate when they worked, when they started, and when they ended. Okay. So this employee here, this is D. McGinnis, and he is in the cutting department, and he worked from 8 to 12. There were 4 hours worked here, and then he worked 2 hours here. Notice the rate that he is compensated is at $10. So the total number of hours worked on this particular job, 71, was 350 hours. So with this card plus all the previous cards came up to 350 hours. The rate is $10 an hour. So we are debiting direct labor here, or transferring into work in process $3,500 worth of direct labor. For job number 72, notice they got more expensive labor here. We've got S. Andrews working on this particular job, and his rate is $15 per hour. And the total number of hours he worked on this job was 500. So 500 times 15 is 7,500. So we have $7,500 worth of direct labor. So between the two jobs here, we've got 3,500. We've got 7,510. That sounds like $11,000 worth of labor. And there it is. So when we debit work in process, $11,000, to show that the labor costs have in fact been transferred into work in process. They become part of the inventory. And that is an asset account. So we debit work in process. And we haven't paid the wages yet. We'll pay them later. So it becomes a liability account, wages payable. So we've accounted for materials. We've accounted for labor. And now we also have factory overhead. So factory overhead, we know comes, I always look up at the ceiling. These are indirect materials. This is indirect labor. This is power, from utility bills. And when you've got depreciation, all of these things become part of factory overhead. All right, so here's a little knowledge check here. For a manufacturer, which of the following would be considered an indirect material? For a manufacturer, indirect material. Remember, indirect material, which becomes part of overhead, would be material that is difficult to trace to an individual job. So fabric used to make sofas, well, I think you probably could. They're making sofas, you can easily trace the cost of the materials to make the sofas. Look at a sofa, you see a lot of fabric there. The glue used to bind the books at a print shop, that's probably a small amount. It's an important amount, but that's a small amount when you've got a print shop there. So the paper, yeah, that'd be easy. But as far as the amount of glue that goes into an individual book, it's probably pretty small. So I'm going to think that would be probably indirect. Plastic bottles filled with shampoo, it's probably easy. When you look at a bottle of shampoo, probably be pretty easy to see the number of bottles that were put into that particular batch. And boxes used to package crackers, well, that's pretty simple to trace those to individual batches. So the one that probably sounds like it is indirect would be the glue. And I am correct. I have official corroboration there. Okay, so here's where I'm going to stop. So the factory overhead, those are the costs necessary to manufacture the product that are difficult to trace to the product. So we had indirect materials, things like glue. Or I know they got that guy who likes to talk about construction. I think it's Connor. You could have, maybe that's nails. You've got indirect wages here, or salaries of 2,000. Maybe that's like supervisory salaries. And you've got utilities of 900. And you've also got depreciation on the equipment, which we got from the accounting department. All of those become part of factory overhead. Okay. So let's stop there. We're not going to get into allocating factory overhead. So if you're following along the slides, we stopped off basically at slide number 18. So what I'd like you to do now, if you haven't done so already, is basically read chapter 2 up through objective number 2. And then as far as the practice exercises, remember the practice exercises come in the chapter review, so that comes after the listing of terms and the multiple choice questions. Do the first 3 practice exercises, 1, 2, 3, and that's where we'll pick up on Thursday. All right. So until next time, let me stop sharing here. I will wish you au revoir and hasta luego and adios, and we will see you on Thursday. Be well, everybody. Talk to you soon on Thursday. Enjoy the rest of today and enjoy Wednesday as well. And don't forget to watch the video, this video, and to read the chapter and try those first 3 exercises. Adios.